Are you struggling to squat deep, or in particular get to around 90 degrees before either a significant rounding of the lumbar spine happens or you just fall immediately back on your butt? Then I have the perfect exercise that's going to address this exact deficit in your hip mobility. What happens is around 90 degrees of hip flexion, the femur needs to be able to access internal rotation to carve out a little bit more space to flex. So the drill we're going to go over is going to work on specifically improving hip internal rotation at that 90 degrees hip flexion mark. But make sure you stay tuned till the end, because after I describe how to perform the drill correctly, we're going to go over proper implementation of the drill and how to program it to get the best results. Okay, we're going to go over an introductory exercise I like to use to free up the hips and pelvis and improve the way they rotate, specifically with hip internal rotation, which is very important for general hip health and function. So I gave this exercise to Matt because he was limited in his left hip internal rotation compared to his right, as well as his straight leg raise and hip flexion on that side. So we're going to do this exercise in left side lying. Now it's important here we have the knees and hips flexed at 90 degrees. If you currently have 90 degrees of hip flexion, so we want to create this right angle from the torso to the femur. So I'll have Matt scoot his shoulders back just a little bit. And now I'll have him place a foam roller in between his knees. Now I also want his knees bent to 90 degrees, so I'll have your foot directly under the knee on both sides. So just move up a little bit. Good. You can rest this. We want both arches, inner arches of the foot, to stay in contact with the wall. What I'm going to have Matt do is keep a relatively neutral pelvis, and I'm going to have him shift his top knee forward over the bottom knee. And you're going to see this foam roller move if you're doing it correctly. If you're doing it wrong and you're just shifting at the low back, you're going to see this move like this, when we should just see it turning. There we go. So he's going to move kind of dynamically back and forth between the two, and I'm going to tell him to think about crushing the roller as he's moving through the range here. So he's getting muscles like the adductors firing. He's also applying pressure of his top foot into the wall. So I should have him feel his inner arch of the foot on the wall. He should keep his heel on the wall. So what's happening in this drill? Right now we're getting relative internal rotation of the bottom hip. So he should be feeling somewhat of a lengthening sensation in this backside glutes, kind of up toward the back pocket. And he should also feel a little bit of upper glute and lower glute activity on his top leg if he's applying pressure into the wall. So he can move back and forth, and once he understands this motion, we can actually load this range to get more length into the back of the hip and get a nice loaded stretch there and kind of create some strength as well. So let's take the roller here, and I'm going to actually have you elevate your hips. So now we can kind of create more leverage to get into the stretch. We're going to place a weight on top of the hip here. Now you're going to drive your knee forward over the bottom knee. Good. Now what do you feel here?
Stretching on that bottom hip.
Good. So that's how you know you're doing it right. You shouldn't feel too much pinching in the hip. You should feel a nice, clean, lengthening sensation in that upper back part of the glute. So what can we do here to create some strength? I can have him push his knee into the ground the entire time. We dynamically move back and forth.
Okay.
Good, so he's moving through the range, thinking about pulling that knee forward, and then pushing through his knee on the bottom leg to come back out of it. And after you go through a few reps here, you'll probably start to feel a bit of a pump on that bottom hip, right?
Mm-hmm, yep.
Especially
just pushing down into the ground.
Exactly. So go nice and slow here. We want to get the most out of the flexibility. We're pausing in the range, creating force, thinking about moving that knee as far forward over the bottom knee as possible. Now, if you're feeling restricted here, you can let that top foot come off a bit, because we don't want ankle range of motion to be the limiting factor here. We want it all to be at the hip. Okay. Now, if you want to get a little bit more length through the back of the hip, since we're in hip flexion, I can have him anteriorly tilt a little bit more at the bottom, so he's kind of tilting the pelvis forward. If we think of our pelvis as a bowl of water, We want to think about spilling the water out the front. This is going to create more length in the back of the hip since this puts us in more hip flexion. So good. You can come on out of that. Typically, we'll do this dynamically for reps, maybe anywhere from 8 to 12 repetitions with a 3-second hold, and then a final hold for maybe 10 to 20 seconds. And then we would retest positions that require internal rotation, such as the bottom of a squat. Easy.
Oh,
He's Asian.
It definitely feels a lot easier on the left right now versus the right.
Right.
For sure.
Also, we would test more isolated table tests if he was on my table at my clinic. I would look at his straight leg raise, his ability to flex the hip with a locked knee, and also his isolated hip internal and external rotation. So something you can even try right now is just a staggered one leg kind of toe touch, and he should feel like he's able to sink into that hip much easier.
Yep, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. And I can feel that stretch in the back of the hip, a lot more of that length.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So really good exercise to...
I can definitely feel the length more in that stretch, for
Cool.
sure.
So really good exercise, the first variation to kind of educate the muscles in what they need to do to kind of pull you into that pelvis over femur internal rotation. And once you understand that, then you can apply it to more of a loaded variation like we saw in the second variation. So first variation, good one to practice on the daily, and then the second variation, maybe treat it more like a loaded stretch, do it 2 to 3 days a week.
Sweet.
So this is one of my favorite exercises for not only improving how the hips feel, but to make some long-term adaptations in hip rotation as well. And you can find this exercise in my 4-week Supple Hips program. If you want to grab it, the link is in the description below. And please, if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the comments below. Peace.